Would you care to say a few words, Mr. Carpenter? I suppose you're just as scared as the rest of us.
In a different way, perhaps. I am fearful when I see people substituting fear for reason. In fact, I would like...
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Thank you very much.
Room 101, Episode 1. In this first installment of Room 101, we take a look at some of the most obvious works of science fiction or speculative fiction that have become, in part or whole, our current reality. George Orwell's 1984, Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, and Jack Finney's The Body Snatchers, aka Invasion of the Body Snatchers, are at the top of the literary and cinematic heap. As the Cold War between the West and the Soviet Union heated up, George Orwell wrote a novel called 1984, his ninth and final book published by Secker and Warburg in 1949. And while his dystopian tome was off by many decades, we see now in the early 21st century the beginnings of his totalitarian vision of the world. In 1984, the world is divided up into three superstates: Oceania, Eurasia, and East Asia, that are deadlocked in a permanent war. The superpowers are so evenly matched that a decisive victory is impossible. But the real reason for the war is to keep their economies productive without adding to the wealth of their citizens, the proles, who live, with the exception of a privileged few, in a state of fear and poverty. Winston Smith, a quiet, frail outer party member, is disturbed by the party's willingness to alter history in order to present its regime as infallible and just. The ruling party's figurehead, Big Brother, keeps a watchful eye on every citizen, including poor Winston. Soon, Winston is taken to Room 101 and tortured until he eventually succumbs and learns to love Big Brother. In this truncated synopsis referenced from lit charts, we see several accurate predictions from Mr. Orwell, including the concept of permanent warfare, keeping economies afloat while enriching the elite class to the detriment of everyone else. American President Dwight D. Eisenhower also warned us about the coming military-industrial complex in his final address to the nation in 1959. And if there is no direct conflict with another superpower, simply turn the population against itself. Soon you will have millions of people buying into the propaganda and hating their fellow neighbors for whatever freshly minted reasons the state can conjure up. The idea of altering history has played out before our eyes over the last several years, as we have witnessed the removal of historical monuments throughout the U.S. and the brazen altering of definitions in the English language. The 1984 concept of Big Brother has been playing out for decades. Towns are now covered with security CCTV cameras, and virtually all movement by citizens is tracked and recorded. Now there are companies across the globe ready to release digital chips to be implanted in humans, designed to easily keep track of everything they do and make sure they are in compliance with state regulations. COVID vaccine passports, for example. This appeals to people who can't be bothered with presenting their papers at checkpoints. You just scan their forearm and off they go. How convenient. As we move into the third year of the pandemic, and the list of restrictions, mandates, and edicts have piled a mile high, and world governments have acquired historic levels of control over its populations, it is important to note one more observation from Orwell's book. Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Brave New World takes place in London, nearly 600 years in the future. Human life has been almost entirely industrialized, controlled by a few people at the top of the world order. Human beings are created and conditioned according to the society's strict caste system, and the natural processes of birth, aging, and death represent horrors in this world. Artificiality is the natural state, and nature is the menace. Alpha, the highest ranked and presumably the most intelligent, then beta, delta, gamma, and finally epsilon, who are in effect low-grade morons that perform menial tasks. This is a world where material comfort and physical pleasure provided by the drug soma and recreational sex are the only concerns. Quote, community, identity, stability, unquote. All the technology, planning, and conditioning of this world state exist solely to support and maintain these ends. Although Brave New World is set approximately 600 years in the future, Huxley was accurate with some key general predictions for the 21st century. The movement towards socialism in the 1920s, for example, becomes, in Huxley's future, the totalitarian world state. Today, in the midst of what is being called the Great Reset, we see a merger of multinational corporations with government, a kind of global corporatocracy where the elites may do what they will with impunity, while everyone else is subject to state-run programs and mandates for the good of democracy. A massive socialist construct wherein you will own nothing and be happy. The normalized use of mood-altering drugs is another accurate prediction from Huxley's book. While SSRIs, or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, like Prozac, Paxil, Zoloft, etc., aren't exactly mandatory yet, they are prescribed with such abandon by doctors who stand to make big bucks by getting their patients hooked on these drugs, that it's more like a passive mandate. As in Brave New World, a drugged populace simply makes them much easier to control. Another aspect of the novel rapidly unfolding before our eyes is the concept of selective genetics. In the 1997 film Gattaca, people can choose which desired genetic traits they want for their children and weed out the negative traits. In Huxley's novel, the state controls the means of procreation. Promiscuous sex is encouraged, and love is forbidden. Humans are grown in labs, produced in different classes, from alpha, being the elite class, down to the lowest grade of epsilon. Brave New World has been adapted to the screen with mixed results. The 1982 version can be found online, and the 2020 one-season series is on Peacock TV. While both have certain flaws, they are definitely worth watching.
Where are you gonna go? Where are you gonna run? Where are you gonna hide? Nowhere. 'Cause there's no one like you left.
The Body Snatchers by Jack Finney. While The Body Snatchers is rather simple in comparison to 1984 and Brave New World, the relevance of Jack Finney's taut Cold War science fiction thriller is easily on par with the aforementioned works. In fact, the book has been adapted to the screen 4 times, along with numerous takeoffs, including The Faculty, Assimilate, and others. In the small, remote town of Mill Valley, California, Dr. Miles Bennell discovers an insidious, horrifying plot. Silently, subtly, Almost imperceptibly, alien life forms are taking over the bodies and minds of his neighbors, friends, and family. The world as he knew it. The aliens take over your body and mind when you sleep. So for Miles and his girlfriend, Becky Driscoll, it's a race against time to try and stop this horrifying menace from space before it's too late. At the core of the Body Snatchers lies the concept of identity and the importance of resistance in the face of forced conformity. Finney's novel asks the question, what if the people you knew and loved were no longer themselves? They might look the same, but you know something is terribly wrong about them. Everyone seems to be suffering from a kind of mass psychosis or hypnosis. They behave and act in lockstep with each other, like one gigantic hive mind. Originally published in Collier's magazine in 1953, The Body Snatchers is only a few years older than Orwell's 1984, and they both were written during the Cold War, as the world watched the rise of communism in the Soviet Union and China. In director Don Siegel's 1954 adaptation, Siegel placed emphasis on the metaphor of communist threat to the alien spores invading the small town of Santa Mira, California.
Listen to me. Please listen. If you don't, if you won't, if you fail to understand, then the same incredible terror that's menacing me will strike at you!
When COVID-19 hit the States in 2020, the Trump push for vaccines was met with total skepticism from the left, the media, celebrities, you name it. But after Trump in 2021, suddenly those same experimental drugs became not only desirable, but there was a massive shift to literally worship these drugs, and more eerily, their big pharma manufacturers. The remaining vaccine skeptics were now seen as the enemy by a population suffering from what is commonly referred to as mass formation psychosis. The concept of presenting a population with a terrifying threat they cannot control, a virus, for example, then offering a solution which they gladly accept. It is the ultimate groupthink or hive mind, which is at the core of Finney's great novel. The Body Snatchers concept is in fact so relevant, it is consistently being remade or spun off. Recommended spin-offs include 1998's The Faculty and Assimilate from 2020. Join us for the next episode of Room 101 and the writer who predicted the 2019 China virus outbreak in 1957.